The Italian American experience is a unique experience only that the American Italians can truly understand. Um, while taking this class, it was really interesting for me to see how the experience of Italian Americans almost reflect that of African Americans who have been in this country for years now. One of the stark differences, I should say, even though this is not about this, one of the things that I really found really interesting about all of this is that the first Italian immigrants came around 1800s, around 1800s. I would say late 1800s, around 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. That's when we had like the greatest influx of Italian Americans come to the U.S. And that's when a lot of them came from Sicily. They weren't necessarily the northern parts of Italy, but it was more of the southern part of Italy. And a lot of them came because of freedom of expression, because of what the Americas were giving, I would say. But when they came, they were almost cast as black people, right? Even though their skin color was white, they were cast as people who were supposed to be demonized, who were less than everybody else, which was really interesting, really profound, that I didn't even realize. But when they first came here, there were a lot of negative things that were put on the Italian American people who immigrated to the U.S. They were labeled and still are labeled as drunks. They were labeled as very loud and rambunctious people, especially the men. They were labeled as violent, even though a lot of them were just trying to make a living to send back over to their families. They did not care about that. The media in the U.S. portrayed them as people who were degenerates, especially the men, like I said before. And as time moved on, it got a little better. But in the media portrayal of Italian American immigrants, it wasn't the best portrayal at all. They were still looked at as gangsters, as his mafias, people who only spoke broken English, right? And so there was this dichotomy of tradition laced in stereotypes, if I can say that, if that makes sense. So you had the traditions of family, you had the traditions of the neighborhood, right? You had the traditions of food within mainstream American culture. But at the same time, you also had them looking like people who weren't civilized. People, like I said before, who were loud and rambunctious, especially during World War II when Mussolini was coming to power. A lot of Americans felt as though all Italians were fascists, and there was this big movement to ban Italians from a lot of American society. And so it definitely did weigh heavily on a lot of Italian Americans in that era, in that culture of that time period. And so like moving forward and moving on, I know one of the movies that we watched were Doing the Right Thing, and how it basically portrayed a sense of neighborhood camaraderie within this Brooklyn neighborhood, of this black Brooklyn neighborhood. And you had Italian Americans who were transplanted. They owned a pizzeria, which is another stereotype, right, of Italian Americans. But with this being all said, you see the progression of Italian Americans they have now. You see to do the right thing. It basically shows the fact that they have now assimilated within the culture of the fabric and the very fabric of American society and American life. And so that was just one of the things that I found really interesting about this class, the Italian American experience, where we looked at the transition and assimilation period of the Italian Americans, how they first were when they came to the United States, how many of them were also lynched. Now in the South, it was not a good place for them to live as well. That's why a lot of them live up north as well. And so you just look at this revolving door of racism that they also endured via one-on-one experience, and also via the media portrayal of how they act from around 1820s to present day.